In 2019, she won the Premio Guamán Poma de Ayala in Indigenous Language, which is a national literary prize in Bolivia for her novel written in the Quechua language. So it is a great pleasure for us, Professor Andía, to be able to welcome you to Cornell today to kick off our speakers series this year. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for very nice words and nice introduction, Dr. Kenneth. And thank you so much, Angelica, for coordinating all this presentation. I'm honored to be here with you, and I'm so happy that I can share a little bit about this whole process of the certification for an Indigenous language. I know that maybe a lot of you are familiar with this tester certification process with ACTFL, but maybe you listen about that, but it's very interesting what happened with Indigenous language, right? Not only for Quechua, but I think that it could be a good example for Nahuatl, for Guarani, for Aymara, for other Indigenous languages here in the US. And so I would like to share with you my screen here and start with this nice presentation. So if you could see my presentation, title of my presentation is Designing, right? In this case, the Quechua language class is rooted in ACTFL Standards to promote spoken proficiency. And as Dr. Kenneth mentioned, and also Angelica, I am a faculty member at The Ohio State University. I teach 6 levels of Quechua from beginning to advanced courses here and for graduate and undergrad students. So that is going to be what I am going to talk about today. I'm going to just give you a little bit brief introduction about what's ACTFL, what's a certification process within the language proficiency standards, if they are applicable to Indigenous languages, and then the language course design, just a little bit of an example, and then we are going to finish with that, and then we are going to have time for the maybe question that maybe you could have after the presentation. And so we are going to start with ACTFL. Maybe you are familiar with that. This ACTFL stands for American Council on Teaching of Foreign Languages. So when we are talking about standards, basically we are referring to this inverted pyramid that they have, how they explain, and this pyramid that represents the functions of the major languages, of the major levels for a language. For example, we have here the novice level, the intermediate level, the advanced level, superior level, and distinguished level. This one was recently added. When I finished my certification, for example, it was not there yet. It was only until superior, right? So ACTFL is an organization that helps to improve and expand the teaching and learning for all languages at all levels of instructions. Right? So why it's important for a Quechua to consider these standards? Sometimes maybe you also, as instructors, as people that are working with less commonly taught languages or Indigenous language too, you listen that, right? This kind of talking that says, oh, but you are not able to talk about science in Quechua. So why we are learning an Indigenous language? Right? We need global languages. We need, Spanish or English or other languages, because these standards, right, apply very well with these big languages, Spanish, Portuguese, right, and German and other languages. But what happened with Quechua? What happened with Indigenous language? So that's why I would like to address this process of certification, right? And here, sorry, I can move here. I am not able to see. Yeah, here. Okay. So if you can see here, ACTFL describes 5 major levels of proficiency, right? We have distinguished, superior, advanced, intermediate, and novice levels, right? These proficiency aspects represent a specific range of abilities for each level and skills. Right? Here an example. I just bring one example that's for novice level, for reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Right? So they organize that in that with these parameters, right? So now, for example, when we have, you can also find all this information in the ACTFL page and also the the link is there, how you could find all, not only for novice level, but for all the levels that they have, right? So as Professor Kenneth mentioned before, I am the first and the only one until now, right? Certified OPI tester for Quechua, right? I obtained this certification in 2019 after almost more than a year and a half for this training, when it usually takes a year. But I'm going to share with you what happened, why I spend more time in this certification, more time than other languages do. So what is an OPI? Sometimes, right, I am an OPI tester. So where these names came from. So OPI stands for Oral Proficiency Interview Tester. So basically I am able to test the oral proficiency of a Quechua speaker. Not writing, not reading, not, not all the other skills, only for oral proficiency. Okay, so MOPI, it was the first certification that maybe a lot of people follow, but the MOPI is the first step towards becoming an ACTFL certified OPI tester. But MOPI has a limited certification. A certified MOPI only works from novice to intermediate levels. But an OPI is an authorized to conduct OPI testing within your own academic institution for advisory purposes and to assign advisory ratings according to the ACTFL protocols. But also an OPI is able to work with ACTFL. But now, since we are talking about university and how to include these standards to our regular classes, so I am going to just present this section. But a certified tester can work with ACTFL, like a regular tester for a particular institution. Within an interview, there are aspects that we have, right? Aspects of performance within an interview. The language functions that are going to be what the students, the tasks that you are going to address during the interview, the context or content or what they are talking about, the accuracy, the language control that the speaker has, or the text type, how they organize the language when the interview is happening, right? So after giving you this just brief information about what ACTFL is and how a process goes, this is the process how you have the certification for it to be a tester, a certified tester. So first here you have a personal OPI and online rating activities. So basically you have around 20 audios of 30 minutes that you have to listen, and then you have to write what you are listening, and then you have to assign a level for that rating. You have to give them a rating. And after that, you have the tester phase where you have a guided interviews with your mentor. You have a mentor during this testing process. With this certification process, you have a mentor that's going to work with you, that's going to help you, to guide you and everything. And tester phase 2, we have an independent and certification interview. So you did it by yourself. And for all these levels, you look for the people for the interviews. No one is going to look for them. You are going to look for the speakers for those interviews. And sometimes you are going to have additional interviews if it's needed. Then you're going to have a notification and awarding the test certification. But here, for example, when I started, it was difficult because I didn't have a mentor that speaks Quechua, right? Because ACTFL didn't have. So my mentor was a Spanish speaker, but with a lot of experience. So she designed the books for the tester packages, the books that are helping the testers that are used during the processing. So she designed those books. So she was the best. She was my mentor. And she was, going with me because she didn't speak Quechua, and she was with a new experience, working with someone that is not working with Spanish or English, right? She was working with an indigenous language. So it was very interesting working with her, and also the work that I was doing, right? So I was doing the interview in Quechua, right? I was doing the interview in Quechua, and I was presenting the transcripts of the interview in Quechua and in Spanish, in both languages, right? And with the Spanish version, she was, basically, she didn't have the opportunity to qualify the audio files, right? She was reading the transcript of the interviews because she didn't know Quechua. So every time that we have this transcription, for example, for the interviews, it was very interesting that I'm going to share with you what kind of difficulties we have. And because it is an indigenous language with a very different settings, if we are talking about language. And so during this process of, certification, and when you work with the standards are something like a recipe. You have to follow it. The standards say something for each level. So you have to follow them. And then you have to make reference. When you are completing the documents for the rating, when you are completing the interview criteria and everything, your reference are the standards. But the standards was kind of different for indigenous languages. And that is what I would like to share with you today. What happened with those standards when you are doing this certification process with an indigenous language, right? Because these standards were not created, and they don't even consider or don't take as a reference an indigenous language, not only Quechua, not Nahuatl, not another one. So the standards proposed for novice and to intermediate levels were not too difficult to adequate to Quechua, because they were like, the speaker can solve a very familiar situation. So, okay, that applies to Quechua. Makes sense? So the standards for novice and intermediate, they were not too difficult to adequate to Quechua when I was doing the interviews. But what was interesting, so when you are doing the interview, the certification process, basically ACTFL provides you with these cards that are for each level. So you have the yellow for superior, you have the intermediate for the green, and then you have orange for advanced. So basically they have already the situations designed. So when you are doing your training, you have to use one of them, right? Because the mentor is going to ask you, so Elvia, you are going to do 2 for intermediate, 4 for advanced, 2 for, they have a number of interviews that they need in order to see if you are able to do the interviews, right? So during these interviews, you have to use the cards that they give you, right? These role plays. So these cards are the role plays during the interview. Always there is a role play, okay? It's a language function, so they have to be able. So I just put here a picture of that and says, you want to buy tickets for a concert, call the ticket office and ask several questions in order to get the information you need. Okay, so these kind of situations are very, common in this section of intermediate level. Talk about concert tickets, returning an item to the store, these kind of things. But these situations are not real for indigenous language, right? Talking about a concert or these kind of things are not going to happen really in Quechua, right? We are not going to send my, Quechua student to go for a concert, in the community where there is not even electricity. So we have to be real. I am from Bolivia. I live in Bolivia for 30 years. I am from the community and I know the reality. Maybe Soledad is going to, know that the concert art, maybe with the musicians in the stage, sometimes with no electricity, right? Only with the instruments and everything. So some of them, I just put one, but a lot of them were not like something that you can use in an interview if you're talking about Quechua, right? And these role play, examples are within your package of tester package. So you have to use them when you are doing the training. And then, right, it was a very interesting aspect about the Quechua language characteristic, right? During the functions, during the interview developing, there is an aspect that says text type. If you remember, that is a language control, right? That how people use the language, really. And for superior level, in the text type says an extend discourse. And for advanced level, for example, it says paragraph length. I'm like, okay, we have this, right? So I was doing my interview with people that speak Quechua, that were working with that, and that have a lot of experience talking in Quechua and everything. And when I present my, the transcription of the interview, it was not a paragraph, right? It says 2 lines, right? A mentor says, Elvia, that person cannot be superior because it's only 2 lines that you put here in writing. I'm like, maybe these 2 lines is for Quechua, but for example, I write here some example for Quechua. It's 2 words. You see here is 2 words that says Antata Aparimpulyawan. Where's Aparimpulyawan Kipuni, right? So these only 2 words in Quechua, but in Spanish is, por favor, continúa trayendo pan para mí, no lo olvides. Only 2 words in Quechua, but in Spanish is huge, right? In English is going to have the same number of words, like 7, 8. So a paragraph in Quechua, for Spanish or for English, could be 2 lines, because we have this language that only works with suffixes, right? So it was one thing that I was working with my mentor, right? I was telling her, you know what, the Quechua is not in the same way that other languages are. We have 2 words, yes, but in other languages are going to be almost a paragraph, right? That was the second thing. And then here, standards, as I mentioned before, I am a certified OPI. So it means that I can tester people from the novice level to superior level, right? So for standards for distinguished, superior, and advanced, they have some interesting characteristics. This is for distinguished, for example. That says they are educated and articulated users of the language. So that's going to be what's a distinguished mean, right? And then, right, we have Quechua, right? The indigenous, the native speakers, we are talking about native speakers. The native speakers of the language have the high level of illiteracy, right? My mother, that is a native speaker of the language, right? It's a native speaker that she is superior because she was monolingual when she was a child. So she knows very well Quechua, right? When I did her interview, just as an example, when I was doing the testing process, she gave a rating of advanced. My mother, native speaker in Quechua, because well articulated, educated. My mom only went to 3rd grade of school, right? So she's not in the settings or the denomination of these standards. And then the second one, also for distinguished, says they can reflect on a wide range of global issues and highly abstract concepts, right? So what do we have here? Indigenous languages, not only Quechua, right, are based on oral culture that usually evokes their own experience to sustain their ideas, right? So I'm going to give you an example. For our people, for Quechua, Quichua, and Runasimi, right, the most important part is when they are talking and they want to tell you that that's going to happen. What I'm telling you is real. They are going to say, mention an experience from the past. For example, my grandmother, for example, my mother, right? They are going to go back and tell you a story because we are this culture of, telling you the story, telling you what's going on before, right? But there is one criteria that says if the person goes back to their own experience, they cannot be advanced, they cannot be distinguished, they cannot be superior because they are going back to their own experience. They cannot speak about a topic in the abstract way. So all my interviews were discarded, right? Like, because all the Quechuas go back to their own experience to explain things, right? So you continue with that, for example, for superior, right? They present their opinions on social and political issues, right? For example, for many years, right, indigenous language speakers and their speakers were not considered important members for political parties, right? So they were not part of how to explain, political process. They are going to just repeat what they listen in the radio or this kind. They're not going to be that. They're not going to do the analysis, the comparison and this kind of thing, because they were not part of that reality, right? And for advanced, just one example, right? The topics are handled concretely, right? The storyteller nature from Quechua, right, is always present in any conversation. So if you could see, right, I only mentioned 4 of them. We have a lot that we can, show you, and we can see these standards, if they are applicable for indigenous language, not only for Quechua, but for a lot of them, all of them maybe, right? But not only for ACTFL. Ohio State University has the privilege to have this FLAS fellowship. So if you are familiar with the FLAS fellowship, is the Foreign Language and Areas Studies Fellowship, right? So where the students who take Quechua, they have to perform an exam, right, at the beginning of the program, at the beginning of the fellowship, and then at the end, right? They have to give a test, to give an exam. And when we do that, right, we have other standards for that, right? So here, for example, for foreign language programs, right, for foreign language programs, the Interagency Language Roundtable, ELR, the scale was developed to measure the person's ability to communicate in a language, right? It consists in 5 levels of language proficiency, and it's the standard grading scale for language proficiency for the federal government. So the students have to complete this test under these criteria. And I only bring 2 of them for you to see how they do not coordinate with indigenous people. So for example, in the intermediate and novice and intermediate level, as I mentioned before, they are not too difficult to adequate to Quechua, right? The speaker can tell and ask someone how to get from here to a nearby hotel, restaurant, or post office. Okay, we can do that in Quechua, right? These levels for novice and intermediate, they're not, the standards are not too difficult to adequate to Quechua. But if we go to the full professional to native proficiency, the speaker can speak to a group of educated native speakers on a professional subject and is sure in communicating what the particular wants to, without obviously irritating the group linguistically, right? So well-educated, the word well-educated, educated, all these aspects are not adequate with what we are working with. I'm not saying that we don't have Quechua speakers that have, degrees, that went to school, that went to university. I'm not saying that, but we are excluding, if we are just considering that group of people that had the opportunity to go to the school, the opportunity to go to the university, we are not talking about a real Quechua community. We are not talking about the native speakers, the monolingual speakers that our students will have the opportunity to go and visit when they do the study abroad, or visit Bolivia or Ecuador or Peru, right? If we are thinking that we are preparing the students for this group of people, maybe we are preparing the students to talk with Soledad, that's here, is a Quechua, has a degree, or me, that I have a degree, I am in the US. Maybe we are preparing the students to talk with, this group of people. and not with the real community, with the real Quechua. I'm not saying that we are not real Soledad, right? But in the community, right? We are not preparing I am not preparing my students to talk and to go and talk with my mother, to go and talk with my grandmother, to go and talk with my community where I am from, right? So here with the language course design, when we talk about language proficiency, we are not talking about class content, right? Because let me just give you an example. When I was doing the training process, right? For example, in Quechua, the past tense is super easy because it's one suffix. We don't struggle like Spanish, right? They have irregular verbs, they have regular verbs, they have endings difference. We don't struggle with that. In Quechua, it's a suffix, that's it. A suffix is for a past tense. So when we were talking with a lot of Quechua instructors in the US, right? They were saying, oh, my students already speak, in the past, in the future, in the first semester, right? But they were talking about what they saw in grammar. So they saw past tense, they saw the future tense, they saw the present tense, but they are not able to maintain. That is the key part when you are talking about proficiency. Maintain what you are saying. If the student is able to say, okay, my name is Elvia, I'm from Bolivia, that's it, that is not proficiency. So the student is going to be able to maintain the discourse. So it's going to talk about oneself, right? For a long time, 4, 3, 5 minutes, and says, I am from my community, my family, all of that, right? So when we are talking about proficiency, we are not talking about how well we are doing with the content or with grammar aspects, right? So after I finished this tester training, I realized that maybe sometimes we are focusing on grammar aspects sometimes with the content more than the result that we want, right? With the proficiency that we want to achieve for our students, right? And for example, when we have this in the first level, so the first level is for novice level. It's for novice level, this oneself. Sometimes some books, right, assign the name of survivor. Another book says that's the parrot level, oneself level, survivor level. Okay, in the speaking, if you could see this, these are the standards that says speakers can communicate a strong message on highly predictable everyday topics. So when we are talking about proficiency, we have to create a number of inputs to promote quality on performance. That is what I have learned after I did this tester training. Because I say, I didn't work with my students that hard that they can have this 30 minutes interview and they can really, really show what they can do with the language, right? So in this case, for example, for novice level, the inputs that we have to create, and sometimes we just start with one self-description, like introduce yourself, that's done, right? But no, we have to create more situations for the students. For example, here, oneself, self-introduction, likes, dislikes, my classes, my routine, my weekend, my physical appearance, my fears, my room, my cooking, my cleaning, my food, my house, my photos, my clothing, my body, my pet, my hobbies, my rent, my bills, my social media profile. So we have to give the students all the inputs, all the situations that we can for this first level, and not end only in introduce yourself and you are done. That is the one level. You are able to introduce yourself, it's done. No, because in the interview, if the speaker, right, if the speaker is not able to go beyond this, my name is and I am from, so the students already, maybe she or he knows a lot of Quechua, but since we do not present this situation, these inputs, this context, so the student is not going to have the opportunity to show how well he's doing with Quechua or with Nahuatl, with Guarani, right? And that is what I would like to share with you, right? So if you could see, that's oneself. When you go there, that is my family, friends, all these other steps, right? The next level that you could improve for the proficiency in your students using any language, right? But now, just give you an example for Quechua. So with all these inputs or situation or context that you can create, then your student is going to be able to improve Quechua, improve the language, because going to have more opportunities to use it in a different context, right? So for example, I present this before, right? For created another step, another thing that it was very helpful for me after I finished my certification process, it was to create the rubrics, because these are very helpful. Sometimes we do not go back and see what we propose for each level, right? So for example, we say for the reading, at the novice level, the readers can understand keywords and cognates, as well as formulaic phrases and that are highly contextualized. So that is what we have to, we have to evaluate. But sometimes they have one semester and we are presenting a whole paragraph with a lot of information, but that is not for that level. That was not designed for that level, right? Sometimes this training makes you realize that sometimes you are asking too much, you are giving too much homework, I don't know. You are asking too much to students, right? And they are stressed, and they were also super stressed at saying, I don't know how to manage past, future tense, or other, grammatical aspects that maybe are not necessary for the level that you are teaching, right? For the level that you are teaching. So this is just an example. For example, for listening, right? For the novice to intermediate level, you could create your own rubric with these own criteria that are going to help the students to do not get frustrated after they read a text or listen an audio file, and they know what you are looking for. Sometimes we are teaching novice level, but we are giving practices for intermediate level. We are preparing exams for an intermediate, advanced level, right? Because we think that the grammar aspects are done, but and they are able to use the language. That's not the case, right? That has to be very clear. We are not talking about grammar aspects. We are talking about proficiency, how they use the language, right? So you can create these rubrics for every single skill, for reading, writing, speaking. Speaking already, we have the interview criteria that can help you, but also for reading, for writing, right? You could create your own rubrics for each level, for novice, for advanced, for intermediate level, that are adequate with, that have coherence with the standard that describes the level. And also is going to give you the opportunity, right, to create materials that are appropriate with the cultural knowledge, right, with the cultural knowledge that we have. For example, now I create my own role plays, right, or role play cards, and I say, okay, I want my students to have these role plays. Yes, I like them. I use them almost every day in my classes, right? I create these role plays and my students like to do it. So for example, now I say, you arrive to a Quechua community, right? First introduce yourself and then ask 4 questions to find out the information about the community leader, because that's what's going on in a community. You cannot just arrive and say, hi, hello, I'm Elvia. You have to find the community leader in order to, have access to the other members, right? These elements are going to be a lot related with the cultural knowledge that we have. Right? For example, for other levels, advanced or intermediate levels, here I have an example, right? That says, just after you arrive home, you realize that a cow is eating your corn crop. Go to your next door neighbor and describe the situation and ask his or her help to remove the cow from your property. It's going to happen in Quechua communities like every day, right? These situations are going to happen. So the students is going to feel that, okay, I'm prepared to do that, right? But if the role play says another contexts or situations that are not real for a community or indigenous language context, is going to be difficult, right? Also for reading parts, right? For indigenous people, we would like to try to create text, short texts that are adequate for each level, right? For indigenous classes, at least, we have the opportunity to create all the materials. But as Soledad knows, it's a lot of work for the instructor, because we are not able to find the audio files, we are not able to find easy videos or texts that are adequate for the novice level, for the intermediate level, for the advanced level. So the instructor has that job, has that work to do, right? So, and also for advanced levels, so you can create news, you can use a lot of materials from other languages and write them in Quechua, translate to Quechua for advanced levels. That are going to help you so much, right? Because if you only are going to work also for community aspects, for community topics, so the students has to have the ability to talk about things that are happening in the country where they are, in the US and in other countries, and tell that and report what they read, what they listen, and everything using Quechua, right? So I hope you have the opportunity to see maybe some things that you are doing already in your classes, and I hope that you share or my point of view about indigenous people and how indigenous people or languages are working so far. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, go ahead, Angelica, if you'd like to go ahead.
No, I just also wanted to say thank you, Ken. I'll kick it to you and then I can go.
Okay, well, we can, we certainly thank you for a very thought-provoking presentation. You've taught us a lot, and I think we should go ahead and we'll open it up for anyone in the audience. If you have a question, you could use the raised hand function if you'd like to ask your own question. Or if you want to send something in by chat, that's fine, but I'd encourage you to just go ahead and use the raised hand function and go ahead and pose any questions you might have.
So until people are thinking about the questions they may want to ask, I can get the Q&A section started here. I was wondering if you've had the opportunity to talk with any other instructors of indigenous languages, and if you can talk a little bit more about that, both maybe thinking about the whole OPI process, but also just in general, the design of thoughtful language materials that take the cultural background into consideration. Is there like a network of indigenous language teachers that I may not be aware of, or does this all work like, by personal connections that you formulate? But if you could talk a little bit more about that, that would be wonderful.
Thank you, Angelica. During my the answering to the process, to the certification process, when I was completing the interview or the grades for PLUS fellowship, there is a section that says comments. So I wrote like a huge text explaining, like, these standards or descriptors, that language descriptors that you have here do not apply to Quechua, or I don't know if they apply to other language, indigenous language. And I wrote that, but I don't know, maybe they just get there, but no one from that particular part for the governmental and the PLUS fellowship, no one answered me to that, to my complaint, right? For the second part, Stanford University since 2016 create a group that says idiomas indígenas en Latinoamérica. That's it. So they have a group, not only for Quechua, but they have Nahuatl, Cachiquel, Quiché. They have all the indigenous language instructors. At least I think that we are 30. Okay, 30 members of that group. And there we are sharing these aspects of, sharing materials, sharing, best practices with other institutions, with other instructors. But what we are struggling with is that a lot of people, other instructors are saying, oh, but that is the variant of Nahuatl from the Serranía. That is the Nahuatl from the other area. That does not apply to my variant. We are struggling with that aspect within these instructors, right? We are saying like, okay, that is fine for your variant, not for my variant. We are facing these kind of aspects, but all of us are sharing and share the ideas that we have to create like a huge bank, you know, of materials, of audios, of videos, or something that can help any variant in Quechua or any variant in Nahuatl.
Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps I could ask a question. I'm curious from the vantage point of the students who are taking a Quechua class. What, you know, are there particular challenges that they confront in learning an indigenous language that is different from a student who is studying Portuguese or Spanish or one of the other another major language? But what are the particular challenges for the students that they face in studying an indigenous language?
I think that when students, you know, are learning Portuguese, are working, and they already know a little bit of Spanish, they work with English. At least they have some structure familiar, right? They have even cognates from Spanish, Quechua, from Spanish, Portuguese, and English. They have those elements that yes, help when you are learning a language, right? You have that reference. But I think what is the most challenging things for my students is because everything is very different in Quechua. They are suffixes. You don't have a word that you could bring here. It's going to be the same. The structure of the language is different. The sound is different, right? The writing, of course, we use the writing from Spanish, from Spanish. The sound even came from Spanish if we are talking about vowels, right? But I think that also that the students want more input, right? Want more situation, want more material. And when they ask you, I'm not, this grammar aspect is not clear for me. Could you please, you know, send me a link for a video? Could you please send me a book or a reading or something? You are like, we don't have it, but I'm going to create that for you today. And what's going on in my classes, for example, my students have 6 courses with me. My students are so much used to my voice, to my variant of Quechua. So when they travel to Peru or to Ecuador, they arrive, I don't understand what they are saying. I'm like, okay, because that's my fault. Because I didn't have, right? There is not available material that I can use for a specific level. I found videos, right, online or somewhere. They are so advanced that when my students listen that, my students from beginning or intermediate level, they get so frustrated. I don't understand one word. I don't understand a suffix that they were using. Like I am, you know, very sad that I cannot go and say, okay, this text is very, you know, for beginning level, that is going to be perfect for you. We don't have it. So I have to create. So again, my students are going to listen to me. Again, my students are going to have my material, my writing, my audio files, my, you know, writing essay and everything. I would love to have someone that could work with me from other variants and create these different materials appropriate for each level and have the students, you know, that input for them to practice.
Thank you.
Other questions? Soledad.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Elvia, for that content that you have just shared. I just liked all. And to point that the comment that Elvia that she just has said, I think that materials are really a huge problem in our teaching classes. Actually, I was talking about this with the other FLTA who is teaching Quechua, who is from Peru, and now she's teaching at Notre Dame. And then we were talking about that our resources for classes are really limited. So then here I can just maybe propose to Elvia that we can like have a kind of chain around the people who are like teaching Quechua and Quichua, and to start creating a platform to have resources that can really help us as teachers, as instructors to teach properly and to be very accurate in terms of teaching. So that will be really helpful. And yeah, you know that my Quechua is kind of different in comparison to Quechua. And my materials for classes are even more limited than Quechua. So it's kind of sad, but I have to struggle every day, and I have to manage myself to create very like proper materials for my classes. And that's something that is in some terms good, because you know your students, you know what they like, and you know your culture, and which can be a good resource for your class. But what about the others? What about the people who are coming like after me, and they will still be struggling with this type of things too? So that's something that I can propose to and can work with you and Elvia. I know that I'll be here in just 2 cycles, but I'm really willing to share with you what I know and what I have with my desire of strengthening our native languages. So it's really nice to talk about this, and I really like it, and I really committed to strengthening our language. And this thing, and the other is about the communication. And so the Quechua that we are teaching at the classroom is kind of different than what they are going to listen in real life. Yeah, it's kind of different actually, but I think in terms of Quechua, Quechua is a very solid language in comparison to my Quechua, like being very specific in Ecuador, in my culture. Like 90% of the people doesn't have any formal Quechua. It's just a spoken Quechua, and most of the like vocabulary words that we have, like 30% of the vocabulary words that we have are from Spanish. So this is kind of difficult. And if we are like, in my case specifically, if I'm teaching to my students like a very Quechua words, it's nice for them to have like 100% of Quechua, so they can go to real life. And they sometimes, I've heard my people like saying, oh, they speak more Quechua than us, because they have like very Quechua words, and these words we are using like Spanish terms. So it's nice in this term. So trying to have them like a very formal Quechua, so they can go to the communities, and they can even teach like new words for them, and so they can exchange knowledge. So that'd be really great. So yeah, just that, and thank you so much. I really appreciate your sharing time.
Denise, right?
Denise, it sounds like you're muted. Hold on.
Yeah, we can't hear you for some odd reason.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. I want to congratulate Professora for her work. It's excellent, and showing how ACTFL actually, it seems like it's biased towards the major languages. And very specific your examples showing that the geographies, I'm sorry about the specifics of each language and how linguistic and ethno-linguistic factors can affect assessment. From Portuguese also, it's a little bit problematic with ACTFL, because a person that speaks Spanish, he or she that never studied Portuguese can take an ACTFL exam, and it's possible that that person is going to be classified as intermediate lower intermediate. And the ACTFL never addressed this. So I was very curious to see what they would respond to you after your good arguments, but it seemed like that they haven't said anything so far. But my question is about how, if you, because Quechua and like Portuguese also are languages that are always small groups of people. And I was wondering if you work and promote the language and motivate the students to continue. What do you do to promote Quechua where you teach? Attract students. Thank you.
Yes. So, for example, when I am the only one who is teaching Quechua right now at the Ohio State University. But for example, when I have an event or something, my students from advanced level go and teach the first courses. Right. So they feel so confident that they can go and, just save me, right, from when I'm in, for a conference or something. So they go and take the course for 1 day, 2 days for my beginning and intermediate level courses. And also a lot of my students are doing their research in Quechua. So they start, with another topic, their PhD or something. And then after learning Quechua, they change their topic and they start working with Quechua, right? And also one of my students was my co-author in my online textbook that is free and online here in the, for OSU and also for everyone, it's open to public. One of my students was the co-author to create this novice to intermediate level textbook. So they really, really want to learn because it's not a language requirement even. They take Quechua because they want to. Yeah.
So just to jump in here for one quick moment, I do want to be mindful of the time. It is 5:30, so if people need to leave early, that is perfectly understandable. We did put a link in chat here. We always ask for input on our events and suggestions for new events. So if you can take a moment and fill that out. Also do bookmark your calendars for our next event on September 13th. But Lisa has her hand up and maybe we can close out the Q&A with Lisa's question.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. It's really, we're really happy to have Quechua back at Cornell. I've fielded a lot of inquiries for it, and we're so happy to have Soledad. So what I was thinking about, as you were talking about earlier about your OPI testing, is I had also done OPI testing here at Cornell as part of the International Teaching Assistant Program. And we were primarily trying to distinguish between intermediate high and advanced low. Or intermediate mid, because the graduate students have to reach intermediate high to be approved to teach in English. So we met once a week and we listened to audio samples and then we would rate them, and they were really tricky. So we'd think it was one thing and it wasn't. It was a group of 5 or 6 of us, we wouldn't always agree. So because you didn't have audio samples in Quechua, as you mentioned, how did you fine tune your rating? Did you practice on Spanish first? I know you mentioned that with your mentor, but
yeah, they were all in English. They were like people, our Spanish speaker, they were doing the interview in English. So we were, rating the samples for the first section, right? We were rating the samples that are in English. And after that, I performed all the other interviews only in Quechua.
Interesting. Okay, thanks.
Well, thank you, everybody. Please join me in a round of applause. Thank you, Elvia, for your wonderful talk. Lots of information and ideas and thoughts. So if people still have a couple of questions, we will stick around. But thank you again to all of you for joining us today. All the best for the beginning of an interesting semester. And we hope to see you all soon at the LRC. Please stop by and say hi. So thank you all for joining today.